Where the 2026 class mattered most in the trenches, Washington's class is elite.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you're getting this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, please make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Now, I got a really fun show coming at all you everydayers out there on this Thursday, where there is so much to get through with this 2026 class. I want to spend a whole lot of time talking about the physicality and how ready for the Big Ten this roster, not just the 2026 class, the entire roster is at this point in time. We'll get there a little bit later. We're going to talk about Jedd Fisch, who followed through in year 2 on his promise to bring the best recruiting class in school history to Washington. But we're going to get there, because where this class mattered the most for Washington, in the trenches, this class is nothing short of elite. And this starts with the crown jewel of this class, 5-star offensive tackle Kodi Greene. When we asked Jedd Fisch about him during his Wednesday press conference, Jedd was very, very blunt, which I love. I respect about this answer, where, you know, he could have been like, yeah, this guy needs to come in and earn a spot. He needs to do this. He needs to do that. No, it's very clear that the expectations around Kodi, who is ranked as the #1 player in California, the #4 offensive tackle in the 2026 class by 247 Sports, the expectation is this dude is exactly what I called him when he committed back in April, a program changer. Because we asked him, Jedd was like, yeah, I expect him to come in here and start. I expect him to take the same sort of trajectory as John Mills. And so I'm really interested into what that might look like, because a follow-up question about him potentially playing left tackle, Jedd was just kind of like, yeah. So this is a lot of fun to think about. There are so many moving pieces right now along Washington's offensive line, but no matter what, it seems like Kodi is going to be a big part of that. Now, I feel like a lot of this right now hinges on the decision of Jurassic Party, who could decide to depart for the NFL draft and be a late day 2, probably early day 3, way more likely pick in the upcoming draft, which would make things more and less complicated at the same time, because if Drew comes back, that's awesome. That's a huge win. That is a really sturdy bookend for you on the right side, because we know he'll probably wind up staying there for another season. If he decides to depart, you probably just kick John Mills over there, which is, again, what makes it more and less complicated at the same time, because Zach Henning has played so well this season. And that's a guy you want to make sure you find time for. Paki Finau was awesome whenever he had to step in for John Mills. Champ Talialia really showed that he could be something at right guard as well. So you have all of these guys as well. And then you have to add Kodi to this mix. And Kodi, you go and you watch that film, and I need to stop using the word elite on this show, because I've already said it several times, but that's the only thing that you can use to describe it. Because when you watch the way his feet move, the way he's able to climb to the second level, the way he slides in pass protection, the way he's able to mirror pass rushers and combat different hand fighting moves, the way he's able to do all of that is so, so impressive. And it's so advanced for his age. And it's one of those things where Jedd said that 19 or 20 of the 23 guys that have currently signed as I'm recording this are set to arrive in January. All of a sudden, again, you talk about John Mills. He was one of those guys who arrived in January. He comes in with that elite size and is able to win the starting job after a very long and hard-fought battle through spring and through fall. And I'm not saying that Kodi's not going to have to battle for his position, where you look at some of the offensive linemen that Washington has brought in recent years that certainly are going to fight for that. Justin Hilkema is a guy I've been really interested in for a while. I think David Boyajian might have what it takes to take that next step forward. He's got that size as well. And then on top of that, you consider a guy like Jack Schaefer from this 2025 class as well, and what he might be able to do. You have several guys at that position who can absolutely battle and give you what you need at that. But Kodi is just such a different level of athlete from everybody else. And I'm not saying those guys are bad athletes, because that's not the case. That's just how good Kodi Greene is. And that was why this coaching staff put every ounce of resources into flipping him back in April. And when they were able to do that, that's why it was such a big win. And what really just kind of helped set the standard for this class was getting that kid in the building. So I look at the offensive line, and, I'll talk a little bit more about Dominic Harris and Adi Yang in a little bit as well. But Kodi is the kind of piece that really just solidifies that group. And it's so exciting to think about because you can say that exact same thing on the defensive side of the ball as well, where Tom Malu is a guy that I'm really interested in, the 3-star defensive lineman from Tacoma, but he's probably going to take a couple of years to develop because he just hasn't been playing football very long. So when you look at the rest of this class, you have 3 blue chip guys. You have TI Umu-Cais, you have Derek Coleman-Brusa, you have JD Hill. And it was really fun to hear Jedd Fisch talk about all of those guys during his press conference, because one of the things that he mentioned with JD Hill when I asked him about him was they really love his versatility, which is a great sign, because one thing we've talked about a lot here on the show is the fact that Washington needs more from the edge rusher position. And he didn't just say that Derek Coleman-Brusa is going to come in and start out on the edge and play 4 different positions. I'll talk about that in a minute. But he also said that, JD Hill is another one of those guys who can give us that inside-outside versatility. And like I've mentioned already on shows this week, when I saw him on the sideline during his official visit, he was standing around watching the outside linebackers, the edge rusher position, with Coach Aaron Van Horn during pregame warmups. So it looks like that's probably where he's also going to start his career. And again, when you think about the fact that 19, 20 of these guys are going to be coming in January, that just is more than likely going to give him that leg up that he needs to get into a college weight program, to get caught up with nutrition and the playbook and all these other things. And all of a sudden, if you were able to get some of that extra edge pressure, which hopefully you still bring in a transfer portal guy, maybe 2, with just the health problems that you've had at the position in recent years, to get a little bit of extra production alongside those 2 guys, that is absolutely massive. Because you look at a guy like Derek Colman-Brusa, and one of the things that I think we might see a little bit more of from this defensive line as it moves forward, when you look at what this class brings, is more of that versatility and more of the Ryan Walters-based defense, of the 5-man fronts, where you can shift another guy inside. And I think Derek is going to be that guy, where he's listed at 267 on 247 Sports. But if you look at him in person, he's closer to 275, probably 280 pounds at this point in time. And again, you turn on that film and the motor and his arms and how fast he is, all of that just screams this dude has all of the potential in the world to be an impact player at the college level. And the more you look at it, the more you think it's going to be so hard to keep him off the field wherever it is that this coaching staff wants to line him up at. And if you want to shift him inside, it just gives you so much more versatility and so much more pass rush, which is exactly what you're looking for. And I think that's just a really exciting thought, because again, this is just what this class needed. This is what this Washington roster needed, was strength and flexibility, especially along the defensive line. And with those 2 guys, plus TI Umu-Cais, who, as all you ever dares out there know, has been a fan favorite on this show for a very, very, very long time. The way that kid hand fights, the way he's able to anchor when defending the run and taking on double teams, the way he's able to use his feet to get into the backfield and use his hands. He's got such advanced pass rush moves for just how young he is too. And I think all of that is so, so important, because when you're able to get that push from the interior and you're able to just get that consistent pressure, all of a sudden, Jedd was spending a lot of time talking about, oh yeah, these were all 1 possession, 10-point games. And the losses we suffered this year going into the 4th quarter, if you're able to have one of these, just not even just one, you need more, 2, 3, 4 of these impact defensive linemen that can change the game on every single snap, that just gives you a much better % chance to win on any given Saturday. And this class up front absolutely gives Washington a chance to do that. And not just that, it's not just these top end guys on the defensive line, but from top to bottom, this is legitimately Washington's best class ever. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at Aura Frames. The holidays are officially here, which means gift hunting season is on. And if you want something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames is the gift that delivers every time. It's not just something you wrap, it's a way to share memories. Because Aura isn't your average picture frame. You can preload the frame with photos before gifting it, so when they plug it in, the memories are already there. No apps to figure out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles. This is something I would absolutely give my parents, my parents live on opposite sides of the country, me up here in Seattle, to see more of me. I know that's exactly what they want on an everyday basis. And I guess my sister and their pets too. just a little bit. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver mat frames named #1 by Wirecutter using promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code COLLEGE. This deal is exclusive to listeners and frames sell out fast, so order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. You got to tip your cap to Jedd Fisch here, because he said during his introductory press conference that he was going to bring Washington its best recruiting class in school history. And he's absolutely done that. Now, I know I've seen some comments from some everydayers here on YouTube, on Facebook, on all forms of social media saying, hey, hold on now. There are some classes from the late 80s, early 90s. This is a very different time in recruiting. I want to make sure that's clear, because this is just so different when we have people dedicated to things like rankings and all sort of that. And just everything is formulated a little bit differently at this point in time. That's not putting down anything that Don James did in the late 80s, early 90s. Just the rankings and how that all plays out is so different then versus now. I just wanted to make sure I got that out there, because speaking of the rankings, this isn't just one of those things where you can just go out and pay the biggest bag for every single guy and you're going to have a whole bunch of highly rated players. Where Jedd Fisch said that there weren't necessarily financial constraints. They just chose to operate the NIL and all that sort of space a little bit differently, where there are some schools that were front loading contracts. It was a really interesting explanation that I don't necessarily have time for over the course of this show, but I think it was one of the things that just kind of made what he and his coaching staff have built a little bit more impressive, because it's something that we've also talked about here on Locked On Huskies so many times over the course of this entire process. It's that this coaching staff is tremendous from an evaluation standpoint. These coaches have done such a great job from the top to the bottom, going through and saying, yeah, this is why we like this guy. This is why we like that guy. There was a point in time where it didn't even seem like Rahsjon Duncan was going to hold an offer from Washington, and that spot might have gone to somebody else. And I know that there was just a push in the coaching staff say, hey, hold on, let's make sure that we give this kid a look too and see what happens there. And that was something that, again, to their credit, has paid off, where Duncan is a top 200 player on 247 Sports. He's the number 78 overall player on Rivals. This guy has risen through the ranks. And when Jedd Fisch talked about the secondary and some of the prerequisites to play there, he fits all of those. It's length, it's versatility, it's physicality. And watching a guy like Rahsjon Duncan is a perfect example of what makes this class so special. Because when he committed in July, he was one of those like, oh yeah, he's right on the fringe of being a 4-star guy. That's a really nice take, kind of where Dominic Harris and Ramzak Fruin are sitting right now, who are certainly going to be a big part of this discussion as well. And it's, oh yeah, that's a really nice evaluation. Maybe he's going to get that bump at some point in time. And then he just goes and balls out during his senior year and gets such a major bump because he is such a nice athlete. He's got some nice track numbers to back that up as well. And you look at the versatility in the secondary, where, as Jedd was talking about that unit as a whole, he said, yeah, I know that if we had to roll out all 5 of those guys in Kasani Giles, Elijah Durr, Jaron Jones, Rahsjon Duncan, and Gavin Day, that we would have a full starting lineup. There are some different ways that you can formulate it. Maybe this guy plays here, maybe this guy plays there, whatever. But that is, again, such an important part of this, because that fits what Ryan Walters wants to do so well. And it's something we've seen a lot over the course of this season. And we've talked about it this week too. Gavin Day is one of those guys where he's not just a big hitting downhill safety, where, yeah, he can play the box really, really well and run support. He can be a guy who can play some man coverage for you against tight ends, maybe even in the slot at different points in time. But he also has the range and the athleticism to be a really nice free safety if needed. And, again, talking about versatility, with Rahsjon Duncan, he's a guy who can play outside corner. He's got the wherewithal and the football IQ to rotate into a too high look or to rotate into a safety spot if he's lined up at outside or if he's lined up in the nickel, wherever that might be. And I think that's a really important part of this as well, is just how versatile a lot of these guys are, not just in the secondary, but throughout this class. I just spent some time talking about it with JD Hill, with Derek Coleman-Brusa, and how they can line up all over the formation. And I think those are things that are really fun, because those evaluations, again, up and down this class, Ramzak Fruin, Isaiah Tokyo really fall into that ballpark, as well as Washington wanted to get bigger, longer linebackers. Dominic Harris is a guy who the evaluation process with him is, hey, yeah, he's absolutely massive, and you got to get in on him early enough. They did a great job with that. You look at so many of these other guys where like Blaise LaVista is another one where it was a little bit later on, JD Hill a little bit later on as well. But the fact that you're able to do that and get those wins is a very significant part of why this class is where it is. And each and every single player that has committed to Washington plays a very, very big part in that. And it's just a really fun thought exercise to kind of go through it, because it's just not even just with the secondary, but overall, you can see so many different just times in the future where so much of this class can be on the field at the same time, because it's the versatility, it's the athleticism, it's just all the different things that make sound football players is what this class is from an evaluation standpoint. And on top of that, this class does such a good job of addressing roster needs. Now, the one thing that I'm really interested in is you took 5 wide receivers last year. You take 4 more this year. Yeah, those numbers are starting to add up really, really quickly. Wouldn't be surprised if we see 2 or 3 at the very least in the 2027 class too. But it's one of the things that, again, it's really nice from an overall roster standpoint to look at as well, is what these elite teams around the country are doing. Is it doesn't matter that we just took a 5-star guy at whatever position. We're going to go take another one at the same position because we can stack talent. We can find creative ways to get these guys on the field together, even if they play the same position. And that's exactly what Washington needs to continue to do to compete at the top of the Big Ten, because you see it around, just even if you look up and down the 247 sports rankings for this very class, USC, Oregon, Ohio State are right there at the top. USC has like 35 signees. It's insane. And it's just, hey, we're going to take all this talent. We're going to figure it out later. Will it work? That remains to be seen. But all the talent is there, and there's absolutely ways for the right coaching staffs to get that into position. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we saw from this coaching staff this season, is that Washington's coaches know how to figure that out and know how to utilize that correctly, specifically at wide receiver, where you add Trez Davis and Jordan Clay so late to a class that already includes Mason James and Blaise LaVista. Yeah, that is a lot of bodies. It's a lot of talented bodies. But you can find a way to rotate some of these guys through, where Jedd talked about Trez Davis being an inside-outside sort of guy, which is really nice when you consider his speed. That pairs well with not just Mason James, but Chris Lawson and Desmond Roebuck as well, where I think that we might see Raiden Vinesbright take a little bit of a transition out to the Z role a little bit more frequently with what he brings to the field from a speed perspective. And you can see that pairing with Trez Davis, pairing with Rashid Williams. I think that's a lot of fun to think about too. And then you look at the X position, it's not just, some of these guys you have coming back, and Adeji Jose, Justice Williams, but Blaise LaVista and Jordan Clay also fit over there really, really nicely. And you can find ways to, again, just have different combinations of all of those guys. And I feel like this coaching staff and at wide receiver with Kevin Cummings in particular, you absolutely have the minds to be able to figure that out. And I think that's a lot of fun, because you could say the exact same thing for the front seven, where you look at all of these different guys and how you can use a Ramzak Fruin and an Isaiah Tokyo, plus some of these guys you have on the roster right now, whether it be a Zadrius Randy Saleh or, a Devin Bryant. I'm trying to think of guys with extra years of eligibility, because there's probably not a huge chance of a lot of those guys seeing the field with a Jacob Manu or an X-Ray Alexander, who are going to be out of eligibility after this season. But again, it's just, you can mix and match so many pieces on this roster in so many different ways. And the fact that you're continuing to level up that talent, where you have 11 blue chip guys right now in this class, that is a really strong number. It's a little bit under 50%, where you're 11 out of 23. But at the same point, this is what you need to keep doing, because if you're able to keep stacking that and keep stacking that and keep stacking that, you are going to be exactly where you need. And it's another thing that Jedd has talked about a lot throughout the process of building a team. It's, we don't want to have to go from a senior to a freshman like you had to do in some cases from 2024 to 2025. But now it's all of a sudden you can go from a junior to a sophomore and a freshman in terms of that progression that you're looking for in terms of youth and experience and different things like that. I feel like that's very evident along the offensive line as that group continues to grow, which is really interesting. But again, it's evident all over the field, and all of the talent that Washington has been able to accrue in this class. We're going to see a lot of the fruits of that labor relatively quickly when we just even get out to spring practice in a couple of months, which I'm already extremely excited for. But as this class continues to build, and as we see these guys like Ramzak Fruin in particular, who I just love to point out whenever possible, A kid who, when you look at the way he moves and the way he hits right now at 6'4" and 215 pounds, and think about the fact that he plays nickel and safety and inside linebacker and outside linebacker at the high school level, and he can probably do at least two, if not three of those things at the college level as well. And the fact that he's probably going to redshirt just strictly because of the bodies that are in front of him. Those are really exciting thoughts. And exactly, again, what you need to compete at the top of the Big Ten. And you think about why a guy like Ramczak might need a redshirt just to add a couple of pounds and make sure that he's physically ready to play. This is one of those rosters from every single perspective that is ready for the Big Ten. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Since day one, this has been just a really interesting thought process, thought experiment, whatever it is you want to call it, because when Jedd Fisch arrived at Washington, there was practically nothing. Kalen DeBoer, when he left, so many other pieces left, whether it been for the transfer portal, the NFL draft, whatever it was, guys who just decided to back out of their NLIs and go somewhere else. There were some really significant pieces, in my opinion, from that class that chose not to wind up at Washington for one reason or another, which just made this a whole lot harder. And then when you throw in the fact that there was no winter transfer portal period for Fisch to work with either, it just made things a whole heck of a lot harder. Now we look at where Washington is 23 months later at this point in time. The quest to building a roster that was physically ready for the Big Ten has been really impressive, because we saw it at points this season that it was okay. Yeah, it's so much better than when it was last year when you were gave up the most sacks in the Big Ten. You couldn't stop the run at different points in time because you didn't really have enough defensive tackles to be able to rotate through at the rate that you might want in this conference. That is certainly not the case anymore. And I want to get into some of these other positions, but I want to start in the trenches just because that's how we started this show. And I think it's really important because you look across this line. You look at some of these guys: Kodi Greene, 6'6", 320, Adiyang Yang, 6'3", 343, Dominic Harris, 6'8", 360. Like, along the offensive line, there are quality bodies in terms of size. And then you couple that with what you're getting on the defensive line with Derek Coleman-Brusa, again, 6'6", 280, JD Hill, 6'2", 275 with extremely long arms. TI Umu-Cais, 6'3", 307 pounds. Like, that is quality size that you're looking for. And when you couple that with some of these other positions and what you're getting elsewhere, I thought that one of the most interesting things that Jedd Fisch has said throughout the season was, I asked him a question after the Wisconsin game where I said, what did you learn about your team, about anything from this loss? And the way he formed his answer was, I know there are people who said, hey, I want to hear more about play calling, I want to hear more about this. But the way he phrased his answer and what he talked about was very, very interesting to me, because he said that we are looking, whenever we play somebody new, we are looking at their roster for the size and length that they have in the middle of the field. And it's not just the offensive line and the defensive line. It's linebackers, it's safeties, it's running backs, it's offensive guards, it's all of just the middle of the field. And that is one of the things that when you look at this class, that's where I've seen the most improvement from Washington. And I lump Rahsjon Duncan, who I talked about earlier, and his ability to potentially play some safety, and Gavin Day in this department too, because of their frames, their long arms, their aggressive mentality, their physicality when it comes to hard hitting. Those are all things that are really exciting to think about in the Big Ten. When you pair that with a couple of 6'4" linebackers with super long arms in Isaiah Tokyo and Ramczak Fruin, that's a really nice win. You look at Brian Bonner, who Jedd Fisch talked about, he's listed at 6'1" 185 pounds. Jedd said he's probably 15, 20 pounds heavier than that at this point in time, and still running a 10.3, 10.4 down in California, which is a really exciting thing to think about. But you talk about all of that, and then you think about tight end, where nothing has been official as of this podcast is recording, but Washington is also targeting 3-star Florida tight end Kodi Greene, 6'6", 255, 260 pounds, somewhere in that ballpark. And just with how physical he is, you look at the overall build of this roster, these freshmen are coming in bigger and better than we've seen in a very, very long time. And that is such an important thing to think about, because that was the thing that helped you struggle against lesser teams in the Big Ten last year. When you go and you just look at some of the losses, where on the road is for the most part a different story. But I like to single out the Iowa game, where that's not a bad team. I want to make that clear. But in terms of the struggles that Washington suffered in that game, in that 40-16 loss where everything just looked so bad, was a lot of that was due to the size and the physicality that the Huskies just straight up did not have last season. Now, those are the games that you are built to win. You look at that Purdue game, you look at that UCLA game, and just how shorthanded this team was, and how you were able to just bulk up behind a really big offensive line and wear teams down with a strong running game. You were able to do some nice things in the passing game and play action and different things like that off of it, which is all really great. But when you couple all of that together on the offensive side, that is what really is going to help you continue to take that next step forward. And when you look at what the schedule looks like next year, hopefully it's a bigger step forward from 8-4 to, 10-2. Like, that's where you probably need to be next season. That's what my expectation is going to be at the very least. But I look at this roster as a whole, and like I said, I didn't want to make sure this was just about the freshmen, but you look at the offensive line. I named some of these guys a little bit earlier too, because they are such important parts of this future. Champ Talialia, who's listed at 6'5", 330. John Mills, who told us in the media several times that he's 6'6", 340. Paki Finau, who's 6'5", 315, 320. These are the kinds of bodies, and it's not just, these big physical bodies, right? You need to have some sort of functional athleticism at that size, which is something that Brennan Carroll talked a lot about when he was still the offensive line coach and offensive coordinator here. There has to be some functionality at that size, and that is the most exciting thing about what Washington is building. It's not just these big hulking dudes that, oh yeah, he's going to be really hard to move in the run game, or you don't want to be in front of that guy because he's going to run you right over, sort of things. No, it's these guys move really well in space. They're able to pull. They're able to still run some of these concepts where you can get somebody like Brian Bonner or Adam Muhammad or Jordan Washington in the run game, get their athleticism into space. And that's also important, because when you have to face the top teams in the conference, the teams that are going to be, the best suited to be able to defend that or combat that or do it themselves, which is why I keep referencing the Ohio States, the USCs, the Oregons, Indianas of this conference. You also have the bodies now to defend it. Because you don't, again, just look at these freshmen. You look at a guy like Rahsjon Duncan and how he tackles on the outside. What Rahsjon Clark, or excuse me, not just Rahsjon Duncan, Dylan Robinson, Rahsjon Clark as well, and what he's been able to do. Alex McLaughlin, how that kid tackles is so much fun to watch. Rylan Dillard Allen, as he continues to add weight to his frame. Zadris Rainey-Saleh at linebacker. You have so much, X-Ray Alexander too. I have to throw him into that bucket. You have so much size and strength and functional athleticism that we haven't seen from this, not even just this team, that this conference is going to force you to adapt to and force you to play with. And I think that's something that this coaching staff, again, deserves a lot of credit for, because you can always go out and take some of these guys that are big projectable bodies, right? Like, I think there are a couple guys on this roster who, when you look at, that might have been just left around from previous coaching staffs, or the Jedd Fisch and his guys took in as well. It's, yeah, we really like this guy, but we want to see him gain 30, 35, 40 pounds before we feel really comfortable with that. Again, that's not the case anymore. You are able to go out and compete and get yourselves in position to land some of these guys that are bigger and faster and stronger at these critical positions of need. And the fact that you're able to sell them that early playing time, sell them whatever else it is to get them over the top, to get them to commit and sign with Washington like they did on Wednesday, is something to be commended for, because it's showing that it's not easy in this conference to be able to do that on a year in, year out basis. And the fact that you have the 5th best recruiting class in the conference right now is really important. That's really, really huge. And I mean, obviously it helps when Penn State has 2 commits. I'm sorry. I had to throw something about that in there because that is just still such a disaster. But I think that a lot of that is important to note as we wrap up the show here, because as you continue to see Washington need to do more and figure out what's next, and Jedd Fisch needs to figure out what's next to get his team over the hump and back into the college football playoff and everything like that. It's the little things that, from the outside, at least, because they're very big, pun somewhat intended there, when you actually do get onto the field, that are going to be the reason that you win or lose games. Because when you go on the road, like we just saw at Wisconsin this year, you need that strength. You need that physicality. And we saw that on the offense, or excuse me, on the defense. We started to see that from the offensive line. The injuries certainly didn't help over the course of that game. But that's one of those things where when you go to Nebraska next year, when you go down to USC, I know that's a slightly different environment in terms of the weather itself, but when you travel next season, those are the kinds of bodies that you are bringing with you. Those are going to be key factors in helping you win games next season. And it's really exciting to think about, because getting all of these guys into the program in January, it's not like, credit to guys that showed up and burned their red shirts that were June enrollees in Dylan Robinson, Desmond Roebuck. But you're not just showing up and you get a couple of months of the conditioning, the meal plans, all that sort of stuff. But the fact that you have 8-9 months to do that before you play your first college game is so, so important. And with what this coaching staff and the strength staff and everyone has shown, it's going to be really important for Washington to continue taking that next step by continuing to add bodies like this. And, as it all comes back to recruiting, as it always does, you look at the 2027 class and what is on the West Coast. And I know I've said this several times, and I'm going to keep emphasizing it because it is that important. When you look at the bodies out West and you look at the talents in this region of the country, Washington has a major opportunity to really level up in that department. Now, you've done it once. Let's see if you can do it consistently, because that is what is really going to turn Washington into a perennial Big Ten power. But that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much to all you everydayers out there for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. If you like everything we have to offer, please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. That's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Friday.